G'day everyone, and welcome back to Morris Modify. So today, master and slave cylinder for the clutch. She's been bleeding down the last 3 weeks. I've been getting by pumping the pedal. I've bled the system twice and she's definitely gone. So that's today's job, and I'll be running through a complete tutorial. What to look for, how to know if your slave cylinder or master cylinder is starting to give way and drawing air, whether it's leaking or not. And pretty much a tutorial on how to replace it and bleed the system. As for what's in front of me here, I have a few little goodies. So the Navara is going through a complete lighting update. Everything is going to be LED. So as you may have seen in the last video, the light bars have all been repositioned as well as new ones fitted. So that's done. The interior lights have been done, so everything in the interior is also LED, as you may have seen. And the license and number plate bulbs are also LED. So what's to come, you might say? Complete new headlights. So the new headlights are actually for a Frontier. They're coming from America, as everything I've actually ordered is coming from America. So there'll be projector lenses for the LED bulbs that are going in there, as well as halo rings, as I just wanted halo rings because I just like halo rings. So halo rings as well to bring it into sort of the modern age of daytime driving lights, and tail lights and side guard indicators. So everything's LED, and it's hopefully going to bring the nav into the modern age in America. So got a fair way to travel, and yeah, so parts will slowly show up, and I'll get to that. But what I'll be looking to do is sort of fitting things as I go, as they show up, and then I'll be doing a complete video of everything in one, and yeah, be able to show hopefully a good tutorial on how to wire up headlights, make halo rings work and whatnot. So as for the future in the GTI, I have to get around to a timing chain on that, so that'll be happening next weekend. Probably start that on a Friday night, carry it through Saturday, finish it Sunday morning, do some test driving, and yeah, sort of hope to show a complete tutorial on what to look for, how to know that your chain is worn, and how to replace, and pretty much show you what to do when you need to do one. So it is always better to get a professional to do it, but I'm all for people having a hobby, and of course I have one too. And the only way you're going to learn is by throwing yourself in anything. So you know, all a mechanic does is pretty much throw himself into a job. That's how we learn. The more you research, the better you get. So pretty much anyone can do anything, I believe, as long as you want to put your effort and time into it. So I won't be spoiling the lights today. I will not be showing exactly what's in the box just yet. So I wish to wait until everything gets here and sort of showcase everything on one big bundle, and after then I will be unboxing, showing exactly what I'll be doing, and hopefully carry out the installation and give you all a tutorial. So fortunately, these are going to have to stay in the box. But as for today, I will say right off the bat, genuine is always best, unless you're upgraded. So I've just gone with a generic sort of, your standard sort of stuff you can find at any auto parts store. Here in Australia, that'd be Repco, Autobarn, or Repco, or Auto Parts Online. It's a Calpro kit. It's sort of a easy, probably your easiest accessible parts you can get. And yeah, so not the most expensive and not the most cheapest. Should do the job, at least for what I'm looking for here. So I'm not too fussed with how the OEM clutch and master operate, so that's what I'll be sticking with. So when you do replace these parts, so you should be doing them both at the same time, and just to avoid any contamination, because if you do have, say, for example, a seal go in the slave, those bits and pieces sort of contaminate the brake fluid, travel through the system, potentially at maybe a microscopic level, act like sandpaper on the seals within the master, and potentially damage the master, and you're up for a master and doing the system twice, or bleeding the system twice. So just do them together, you may as well. One's gone, the other's probably not far behind. And yeah, now the biggest and clearest indicator, and the first thing I always check when you get a spongy pedal, is underneath the truck. You want to check your slave. So the best thing to do is get a pick, which I'll be doing shortly on what's ahead of me. And you just want to peel this boot back So if you see any fluid within this boot, you know that she's got a leak. The seal within here in the actual cylinder is actually leaking past the O-ring that's around there, and she's actually drawing in air, or if it's bad enough, pushing out fluid. So they usually draw in air first, but when they're really bad, they actually leak fluid. It's the same for the actual master cylinder. You'll have a leak here on this side of the cylinder, so you should pump, and she'll actually come into the inside of the vehicle. You'll actually get a wet patch where the shaft goes onto the pedal, and yeah, you'll have a clear sign of a leak. So before I get onto the master and slave replacement, I'll just give a quick update on my extraction vent that I fitted about 2 or 3 weeks ago. So as you can see, I've added this catchment or air deflector that actually grabs the air thrown to the left from the fan and directs it out the extraction vent. So I was surprised to begin with, but I'm even more so surprised now. From what I can feel at a standstill at idle, the airflow has actually increased by probably what feels to be 20 or 30%, which I was just gobsmacked at. And as for data, I don't actually have anything that can accurately measure, no thermo gear or anything just yet. I would like to get something like that one day to actually do some proper tests on the next few builds coming up. But as for now, we'll just have to go through my cylinder head temperature gauge and my EGT gauge. So before I actually added the extraction vent, the cylinder head temperature would roughly sit on, after an hour's drive, probably around between 78 and 80 degrees cruising down the highway, and the EGT probably roughly around 250, 300 degrees. Coming to a standstill after an hour's drive, so you pull into your driveway and you're sort of cooling down the engine, probably from about 78 degrees to about 76. It would take about 10 minutes, and the EGT probably dropped to maybe 110, 100 degrees within maybe 7 minutes. So not too long, not too fast. It's sort of standard what you find in most sort of diesel trucks with oil-cooled turbos and whatnot these days. But now with the actual extraction vent, so same thing after an hour's drive, she likes to sit around 68 to 72 degrees on the highway. That's just cruising. And coming to a standstill and cooling down off the driveway, probably comes from about, well, it drops quicker because obviously it's lower, so probably around 68 degrees to about 65 degrees within the first 2 to 3 minutes. So it drops dramatically, maybe a bit too quick for my liking, but that's what I was after. So, and the EGT gauge roughly from about 200 degrees, which it sits at now, so it only sits about 200 degrees running down a highway. That might be because of the tune as well. I'm not sure if it really has to do with the extraction vent just yet, but if the intercooler is running more efficiently, that would add to it. So yeah, she roughly sits at about 200 degrees on the highway, and coming to a cool down standstill within about 2 minutes down to about 100 degrees as well. So a big improvement, an improvement I did not expect. I did want this to happen. Basically, I just wanted to feel air out the bonnet and know that it's working, but to see that dramatic of a change has kind of blown me away. So I'm yet to find out whether 68 degrees is running a bit too cool for a diesel engine, but I'm still learning about diesels. My whole apprenticeship before here was all petrols, including aeroplanes, so diesel's still fairly new to me, and sort of figuring that out for myself. So as far as I'm aware, it hasn't hurt anything. If anything, it's improved performance and torque down low, but we'll see. It's still sort of early days in the build, and yeah. So to make this deflection vent, if I haven't mentioned it already, I used toolbox liner, which was oil and water resistant, and as I've now found, heat resistant as well. And to bend it and get that shape, I literally just use grill material that you can find at any auto parts store. It's quite malleable and bendable and pretty rigid as well, so perfect for what I needed it for. I just sort of bent the layers of toolbox liner over it and use zip ties to actually secure it. Bloody brilliant invention, aren't they? But anyway, let's get to the actual master and clutch cylinder. So, brake fluid. In the modern vehicles, or pretty much any vehicle probably after the 90s, you pretty much use brake fluid for your clutch fluid as well. So this being because of the high boiling point, obviously a clutch works similar to a brake. It's a friction material over a metal surface, and obviously to lock up your clutch, you're sliding both over each other and they clamp and create a bit of heat while they're doing so. So high boiling point, why we use brake fluid nowadays. This is my clutch cylinder here, my clutch master, and here is my brake master reservoir right here. So, before you work on any system involving brake fluid, you'll want to use a guard liner. Brake fluid is hygroscopic, which means it draws moisture from the air or anything it touches. And if you drop it on paint, you might have heard this previously from maybe your dad or your uncle, or if you're in the industry, from your boss. If you drip any brake fluid on paint, quickly get a bottle of water or a bucket of water and just tip it on there. So water disperses brake fluid pretty much instantaneously because it's hygroscopic, and you'll wash it off any paint. And you want to get it off that paint quickly because it probably starts working almost as soon as you drop it on there. So if you want to do your own little experiment, and there's something lying around with paint on it that you don't care about, drip a little bit of this on there, let it sit overnight, and you'll find tomorrow or the next day it'll actually have bubbled up and raised that piece. And I found out the hard way, not listening to my boss. I spilt some brake fluid on the hoist, come back the next day, and what do you know, the paint has lifted. And let's just say I was reluctant to tell him. I'm not even sure if I did. He found out though, and I got in trouble. So anyway, don't drip this on paint, use a guard liner, and yeah, be careful with it. So, we will be replacing the master cylinder today. So as you can probably see, it's just a small unit. So when you're checking your clutch fluid or brake fluid, if your fluid's actually gone this color, usually that's an indication that you've actually drawn in moisture into the fluid and it's due for a flush. In my case, this is actually perish seal material coming from the actual master or slave cylinder, and it's actually contaminated the actual fluid. So I flushed this fluid twice and it's still this color. So pretty bad, pretty horrible, very, very much due for a bleed. And in my case, actually a replacement. So it goes the same for the clutch, the brake fluid. As you can see, this brake fluid is getting quite dark as well, but I flushed this probably about 3 years ago. You're supposed to flush the system every 2 years for brake fluid, and it's more than likely the same for your clutch fluid as well. But whether your mechanic actually does that or not is really up to them. So if you're going by the book, it's every 2 years for your brake fluid and probably the same for your clutch fluid. But if you're a mechanic or you just like to work in your cars often, just keep an eye on them. There is actually some tabs that you can actually test them with. You sort of dip it in there, and if it changes the color, it'll tell you whether it's due or not. But yeah, so today we'll be replacing the master, and here is the slave cylinder. So it's going to be actually pretty difficult for me to actually record the replacement of this while under here, but I'll do the best I can. So you'll find if the vehicle you're working on actually has an external slave, some of them actually have, transaxles usually actually have centrifugal slaves inside the gearbox, which are an absolute pain to actually replace. It does mean pull the gearbox out, and you pretty much by then should replace the clutch and everything else while you're at it. Poor design, I hate it, but anyway, that's what manufacturers have chosen to do in their transaxles. But today we are working on an external slave cylinder. So, first things I check, as soon as I've got a spongy pedal in the morning, I get underneath and see this boot here. You want to peel this back, and we'll just see whether she's got fluid or contamination underneath. Of course, I'm not going to play the game, and there we go. And there you go, straight away. Spongy pedal. She's a little bit damp in there. I can get a bit of video. So not too bad. If anything, that might be the grease. I'd say that's just the grease that I put in there a while ago. So it might be a little bit damp in there, but yeah, she's drawing in air, and I'd say it's probably going to be the slave, but it might be the master. We'll see when I pull the master out. But yeah, you want to pull this boot back, and usually if it's quite a bad leak, you'll actually find it'll bubble as soon as you squeeze. Say you squeeze the boot like this, you'll actually find it'll actually bleed out a fair bit of fluid, and you know it's most definitely the slave that's failed. So yeah, before commencing the job, you'll want to clamp off this clutch fluid line here with a pair of line clamps if you've got them. If you don't have them, like I don't today, I'm just going to use a pair of vice grips, and you're going to want to get some, maybe a rag or something to help avoid the sharp teeth of the actual vice grips actually biting into the actual clutch fluid line too deep. So after clamping the line, as you can see, there's a pair of vice grips on a rag. You'll want to undo the actual brake line or clutch fluid line first. So this is, just bear with me, this is quite difficult with one hand holding the camera. So as you can see, 12mm on the back here. There we go. So hopefully not too much fluid should come out of there. So there's your banjo bolt, and you want to make sure you grab these two washers, these two crush washers here. If you can, you want to replace them. Just put them aside. I haven't got new ones here, so hopefully they should do the job again. Hopefully. But yeah, so there's your banjo bolt. That's where your fluid comes out. Thankfully no fluid's dripping, probably due to the line clamp. And now it's just these two 12s here, and the slave should come right out in that line. And there you go, slave cylinder removed. And there's the grease, and probably mixed in with a bit of brake fluid as well, we'll see. Doesn't look too bad in there, I guess, but yeah, slave cylinder removed. So you just want to pop the new boot onto the old slave pin. So as you can see, there's actually a groove cut out for where the actual boot's supposed to go. So just on like so, and there it is sitting on the groove. And then you want to put the pin and boot back onto the new slave. And there she is, she's in place, ready to go. Some of that grease you used on the pin, you're going to put some on the actual fork joint as well, that little sort of crater there where the pin slides. I just like to fill it up as much as I possibly can, as that's going to be sliding and pushing a lot. There has been cases where, or at least I've heard, but I've never seen it, where the pin will actually wear through the locator crater there. So I've never seen it myself, but I have heard of horror stories. So if you've heard me talk about spring washers before, here I have two, and those spring washers are flat, so they're not going to do their job. But I do have Loctite here, so I'll be using medium strength Loctite anyway, and it should still achieve the same job. So if you got any sort of, you just want to make sure that nothing sort of falls out on you, especially the clutch, and you don't want to be sort of, yeah, in a bad situation where you have no clutch and you can't get out of gear. So you're probably going to have a hard time fitting this the first time. Before you started, remove the actual blanking cap for the line. You want to make sure that's actually gone before you try to thread. You're probably not going to be able to get the banjo bolt in anyway, but just make sure that's removed. You're going to push the slave piston back inside like so, and it should locate on the holes. So it's very difficult to do this with one hand holding a camera and the other hand on the tools, but I'm figuring it out. So now to fit the banjo. So you want to leave one washer on the actual banjo bolt, and the other you're going to slip underneath just as you locate the bolt. So this might be very difficult for me to do with one hand, so I'm just going to drop the phone for a second here and locate it. So unfortunately we don't have a way of showing, but the best way to do it really is slip. So one of the actual crush washers, or aluminium, usually brass or copper washer, in my case copper washers underneath the head, one underneath the banjo, and it should thread in hopefully nicely.
shouldn't be too much pain. These aren't usually too bad to do. And there we go, she's located. So now I'm just going to nip that up. I'm just going to double check. So there you see the washer, sealing washer underneath and one on top. So the slave's all secure. I can now pull the vice grips. Sorry, I can pull the vice grips off, or line clamps as they should be. And yeah, it should be all good to go and start on the master. See right there, that's the clutch fork. And see that pin? You actually want to remove the clevis pin, which is right here, that locates the fork from the actual foot pedal. So this locking spring here is going to come undone. Usually you can get maybe some needle nose pliers. I'm just going to try and pull it. Oh, not successful, which is a rare thing. But there you go, so that's the locking pin. Now I'm going to pull the clevis pin, or push it out. In my case, push and pull, and there you go. Clevis pin is out, the fork is now free. So now all I have to do is unbolt the master from the outside, but first I have to remove the banjo bolt from the actual clutch fluid line. Okay, so up to removing the master. We've just removed the master cylinder fork from the actual clutch foot pedal. So now what you want to do is you probably want to crack this line first, then crack these two nuts. You want to remove one of these completely, remove these until they're probably nearly all the way. Then hopefully this is loose enough that you can actually undo by your fingers, and you can get a finger under there without spilling brake fluid everywhere. And hopefully just sort of a few threads left on one of these nuts, probably this one, and then you can pull it out without spilling too much brake fluid. That's the idea, and hopefully we can achieve that. So I want to get that line as loose as possible without spilling brake fluid, so that I'll be able to undo it with my fingers, and it looks like we're just about there. Crack those two securing nuts. Unfortunately, quite close to the booster, so the socket is getting caught. Bit of a pain. Nothing to stress about though. So remove that one completely. It'll look like that. Clutch fluid line is going to be as loose as I thought it was, so it might be a bit of a fight with the spanner. So here we go. So get that nut as far loose as possible, while still holding on to the actual master cylinder. Just keep loosening yourself, and hopefully I can catch it before it spills too much fluid. It's off. Thing underneath. And because I've left the cap on, I haven't lost too much fluid. As you can see, she's still just above max. So there's your old foot fork and connection to the foot pedal. And yeah, that's the master cylinder removed. So nothing too complicated, but yeah. We'll adjust the free play once this is in. So we have to adjust the free play and the pedal to the actual fork. So I'll actually just slip this in now, and we'll adjust that afterwards. So as simple as just popping through, back into those threads. Sorry, those studs.
better trouble because of the pedal behind it. But no adjustment needed. We'll just tighten these bolts. Sorry, we'll tighten these nuts. And we'll be on to the bleeding system very shortly. So pop that cap back off. It's just a sealing cap into the thread. Now I like to put these aside because you never know when you're going to be doing some work and you need a little cap. And these are nice and brightly coloured, so you don't lose them. So you want to sort of wiggle this around and make sure the thread actually catches. You do not want to cross thread this. You really don't want to cross thread anything, to be honest, but I really would not like to go out and get a new fitting or a new master cylinder, or have to wait for a new master cylinder because I had to order this one in because I've cross threaded the actual nut. So just take it slow. You should be pretty positive when you grab the thread properly, and it should just line up. Pretty straightforward. So you don't want to go too over tight on anything really, but you definitely don't want to go over tight and take the thread. If you go too tight, you probably will crack the housing you tighten the nut into, and then you're in big trouble. That's a new slave or new part that you're working on. So again, you just want it nice and firm, not over tight. So there we go. Having a bit of trouble getting into contact with anyone to give me a hand to record this while I'm actually doing the bleeding, so I'm going to have to do it myself. So basically is I'll be filling this syringe here with brake fluid. I'll be cracking this nipple, but first I'll be cracking the master cylinder nipple first. So the one up here, this will allow me to bleed the master first. Once I'm able to force fluid through the slave, through the system, and it comes out of this nipple first, I'll then close this or tighten the actual bleed screw. Then of which I will fill the reservoir, reverse bleeding, from the bottom until it reaches max. So you want to reverse bleeding, and you want to reverse bleed the system by pretty much sticking the syringe on there as best as possible and pushing the fluid up. It's going to be a little bit difficult to record this. So as you can see, cracking the top bleed nipple first. You only really need maybe a full turn or turn and a half. That should be enough. And I'm using .3 brake fluid, which is what's on the caps. So both the caps of the clutch and brake fluid reservoir. And basically I'm just going to fill this syringe completely. And try my hardest not to spill any. When I get underneath, it's going to be very, very hard to record this. I'm going to try and push the air out and try and make sure I don't get any air in the actual clutch system. So it's going to be difficult doing this by myself. There's the bleed nipple there. I've just got to crack that. Now this is going to be quite difficult. I will likely make a misplace. I've run into the unfortunate situation where the bleed nipple is actually a little bit smaller than my syringe pipe, but we'll see how we go.
and there you can see it's already popping out. So I'm going to need to hold that line tight onto that nipple in order to bleed this successfully. So unfortunately I probably won't be able to record this, but I'm just going to try and hold it in place best I can. We'll see how we go. Sort of just resting it on my forehead here. I can actually see what's going on, but we'll see how we go. There we go. If you can see that. Alright, so if you can see that, hopefully you can. I'm slowly pushing the fluid through on the syringe. And I'm going to wait until it actually drips down from that nipple. And there we go there. So I've actually got fluid coming down from up top now. So now I would like to block this nipple. So lock this one off, tighten it, go back up top. So I'm just going to leave this in place. I'm going to go back up top. And I should see this is wet, and I can see that fluid's actually sprayed onto there. I'm not sure if you can see that. So I'm going to lock this nipple off now. So now I know that the master cylinder should be bled. I'll pop this cap off. So now that you've sort of seen what I've done from underneath, I'll leave the hopefully camera up here, and hopefully it's going to record the reservoir slowly filling. Let's see how we go. So there, fluid is pretty much at max level. So, just going to pop the cap back on for now. Now going to get in the driver's seat and we'll see how the clutch feels. Hopefully, if I'm lucky, first time lucky, it's all good. And no, there's definitely air in there. So, I'm going to need to do this a couple times. So I'll pump her up. Of course it never works at first go. That's worth a shot, isn't it? So getting up there. I'll just keep pumping this. Hopefully pump the air to the actual master. You might have to do this a couple times. Definitely feels better than the previous slave master combo. So it's better. And now we'll have to draw some more fluid out the top and start again. So like I said, if you're just bleeding the system, you want to pretty much repeat what I'll be doing now. You want to draw the fluid out, probably near minimum. There, and she's definitely a bit too full. Check the pedal. and I doubt it. Oh, better. So I'm going to repeat the process yet again. So draw the fluid out. Might actually crack this again. So we're definitely getting good fluid out of there. Probably want to push just a little bit more. Basically, at some point, the idea is that I'm going to get a hard pedal. You know, it's definitely getting there now. I'm actually pretty happy with that. So I'll take it for a drive. So there you go. So afterwards, obviously make sure you put the cap back on. So I'm just going to leave it a little bit above max there. Should be right. And I know a lot of people discard these things, but they're there for a reason. So pop those back on too. It's just worth having, especially if they're there, why not use them, right? And that's on both the master and slave. So we'll take it for a drive and see how we go. I wouldn't doubt that you probably had an issue like me, and while you're underneath, you pour some pressure through the bleeder and the hose pops off and sprays all over your face and everything else. Yep, that's probably going to happen to everyone at some point. So you want to douse absolutely everything that you think you've sprayed with water, and hopefully get rid of any chance of contamination. You just want to make sure that there's no breakthrough on any painted objects and components. So I just doused the whole lot. Hopefully she doesn't need any adjustment. Let's see how we go. So just wash everything down with water, make sure nothing has any brake fluid on it. We don't want any of that paint peeling. After the clutch bleed. So if your pedal stays firm, it doesn't go spongy at all, and you have no issues on the drive, the pickup stays exactly where it's supposed to be, you can probably call that job done. You've probably got no air in the system, and happy days, job finished. Just check it the next few mornings. If it goes spongy at all, just bleed it and she should be alright. If in like my case, she's gone spongy straight down the road, you probably most definitely got air in the system still, so you're probably going to want to bleed it again, and maybe even do it the old fashioned way. If you have someone to give you a hand, pump the pedal, hold it down, crack the nipple, keep bleeding it, repeat, you know, and hopefully that should do the job. Otherwise, for myself, I'm just going to keep driving it. These systems are supposed to be self-bleeding, so I'm just going to keep pumping the pedal before and after drives and during drives, and hopefully at some point overnight or during the drive, the air will find its way to the top of the reservoir. As I said, it's supposed to be self-bleeding, or even forced to the reservoir by pumping the pedal. So that's what I'm going to do. I wouldn't recommend that. I've just gotten away with doing it in the past many times before, and on my own vehicles, of course. But yeah, anyway, I hope this job was actually helpful. I hope the video actually was educational and helped some people out there with a few questions on how to do this job. As for the next video, next weekend, I will be doing a GTI chain, so the Mark 5 GTI chain, just a camshaft timing chain. It's a fair bit of work. It needs to be done. Yeah, I thank you all for sticking around, and I hope this video helped any of you in any way. Even got a laugh again. I'm just starting out. I enjoy making these videos. It's become a hobby. Keeps me busy, and yeah. Anyway, love, build, and improve, guys.